Good afternoon, everyone. This is Smith, Chairman of the EMS Medicaid TAC. It's 2:00. We'll give just a couple more minutes to see if we have others that will be jumping on. Joe Pruitt may be just a couple minutes late. He had a meeting he had to attend beforehand. And one of our other members is signing on.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll hang on just a moment before we start. We ensure we get our members on board.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I apologize. This is Erin. Apparently my headphones do not want to work today, so I'm going to work on trying to get those ready. Does everyone have their camera on? Because I'm also not seeing anybody, so I could just be having some technical difficulty. Oh, there's everybody. Maybe I'm just having issues today. I've been out a week and a half, so my computer doesn't want to work today.
It's all fine. I was saying Joe Pruitt may be a couple minutes late signing on. He had a 1 o'clock meeting he had to attend. Troy Walker is actually in DC with his family, so he's going to attempt to connect through his telephone. So we'll be getting him on. We'll call for a roll here in just a second.
Perfect. It looks like the waiting room is starting to clear out a little bit as well.
Very good. How does the waiting room look now, Erin?
It just cleared. I was trying to find my unmute button.
All right.
And looks like Linda is joining us right now.
Okay. Yeah, Troy Walker is saying he's here via chat. He can turn his phone on for voting if that's okay.
Perfect. As long as his camera's on anytime you vote. It looks like all you'll need to do is establish a quorum, but I don't see where you're approving any minutes or anything. So it won't be till we get down a little further.
Sure.
So that should be good.
Yeah, I wanted to wait on the minute approval until we have our regularly scheduled meeting and only had this meeting to discuss the prior authorization / medical necessity statement discussion.
Absolutely. And these minutes can also be approved in that meeting along with those. It does look like the waiting room is cleared.
Okay. Would you mind calling roll call for us, please?
Okay. So I have Keith.
Present.
Our new member, Joshua, is he here?
Joshua Brand, are you on by chance?
I've got Linda. I see her logged in right here, but I don't hear her. Linda, you're on mute.
Who's giving all the problems hearing Linda?
Yeah, she just her IT folks just got her speaker and camera changed out, so she should be able to sign in here in a moment.
Okay, I see her logged in. Maybe we just can't hear her, so I'll move on. Dana.
I'm here.
Joe. Troy.
I'm here.
Okay, and Jacob.
I'm present.
Okay, looks like you have everyone except Joshua and Joe.
Okay. Joshua had a email issue that their company just changed their email addresses around, so the email we were originally given is an inactive email, so I sent him another link earlier today and was hoping he might be able to jump on. But we will see if he gets on here in a moment. Like I said, Joe said he would get on as well as soon as he left the one meeting he was in. So so let's go ahead and jump into the meat and potatoes of why we've asked for this meeting today. We've discussed at several of the prior meetings about the prior authorization issue that we've got that is severely causing issues with providers being able to get reimbursed for the Medicaid transports that they're performing. Let me also point out again, this is a special meeting, so we have to stick to the agenda as it's written, and we can't discuss anything other than what is on the agenda. So what we would like to accomplish in today's meeting is first off, find out the data elements that the MCOs must have and the information that EMS needs to have in order to come up with hopefully a form that we can use as a medical necessity statement and not necessarily be used as a prior authorization form in itself, because apparently the big issue that the prior authorizations are causing is the fact that the prior authorization has to be submitted before the claim is submitted. And because typically EMS cannot get that information before arriving to a hospital, it's pretty routine that the claim information is sent in pretty much as soon as the crew syncs with the at the end of the transport and the information goes, which then creates an issue. So as we discussed in our last meeting, we were wanting to look at potentially doing away with the prior authorization and replacing that with a medical necessity statement that could go in with the claim when the claim is done, similar to how the Medicare PCS form is currently handled. So from the perspective of defining data required data elements, from our MCO perspective, what information do you or must you have from our EMS crews on a medical necessity statement in order for you to be able to either evaluate or process a claim for EMS to be able to be reimbursed? And I'll open the floor up to the MCOs to be able to comment.
And this is Stuart Owen with WellCare.
Hey, Stuart.
Yeah, good afternoon, Keith.
Mhm.
Yeah, and look at, looking at the form, and I've got a copy of it up. I could share it. I think this is what you all sent as an example. I can share that. I think from prior, thank you, Aaron. Prior discussion, there's a question about diagnosis, but the form doesn't have diagnosis, but that could be included on the claim, if I understand correctly. Like the diagnosis could be, that would be submitted on the claim along with this form. And this form is basically the physician saying it was medically necessary for the person to be transported via ambulance, not through other ways because. And then I just see, a lot of kind of just basic information, I guess, patient information and stuff. So, and I'm looking at the Medicare one. Let me, I believe this is it. Are y'all seeing a form?
Yes, that's very similar. That's a little bit different from the
Oh, okay.
MCS form or the PCS form that Medicare has. However, by the looks of this form, it is very similar, but it is a little different.
Okay. Yeah, well, do you have, because I thought I was pulling that one up, but I probably, apparently I pulled up the
No,
different
that's,
one.
I was just curious. This one may have been sent out and I did not see it, but this is the first time I've seen it. Are there any other
Okay.
members from the TAC that has seen this form?
Let me scroll up and see what the source of it. I think this came, I believe there was maybe a law firm that sent somebody on the TAC. this template.
Yeah, no, we've used the PCS form from a law firm.
Okay.
That looks a little bit different than this.
Okay, all right. Well, when I look at this one, and I presume the other one's the same way, it seems like, because there's just a lot of, basic member information that you would have to have, and date and transfer and all that. And then the physician statement. And then I can see, as long as that's on there, I guess the question is, if anything's missing, is it therefore incomplete?
Sure.
I mean, so like this patient information, last name, first name, date of birth, gender, certifying physician, practitioner,
Recording in progress.
with their name and NPI. We got an echo.
Yeah,
I
okay.
muted everyone. Sorry about that, Stuart.
That's right. With their NPI, place of employment, name, address, date of order. And I guess that's the order for the transport from and to.
Uh-huh.
Number of transports requested in a 60-day period. I don't understand that. Why that would.
I believe, I'll answer that, but then let's get to Judy's question because she's got her hand up. Typically, when you see a comment like the number of transport requested in a 60-day period, as if it's going to be a recurring. So let's say it's going to be a kidney or something along that line.
Okay.
Typically,
So it's a series.
Yeah,
Okay,
typically
it's a
with
series.
Medicare, you only have to fill that out if it's going to be recurring in a 30-day period. So that's typically what that's about. But let's see real quick what Judy had there. So Judy, go ahead.
Hi, Keith. I was just wondering, as a provider, what if you can't check any of those boxes? So let's say the patient goes to the emergency department via ambulance and none of those things apply. So then the physician cannot certify that they needed to come by ambulance. So what
This is
happens then?
this is non-emergency, like they're already at the hospital or facility, right? And then now they need a
Right.
non-emergency. It's not the emergency, right?
Right. This would be for
So
non-emergency.
leaving okay, I am so sorry.
No, it's all right.
And Suzanne, you had a question?
Yes, hi, Suzanne Lewis from United Healthcare. And I think one of my questions was just answered. When I was looking at the form, it said non-emergent transport services. So that's correct. This is for non-emergent transport.
Mhm.
Okay. And United has a company that we use for non-emergent stretcher transport services, and we have a form that we already use, and I don't have it right in front of me right this second, but are you trying to, and I apologize, I'm coming into this, I think a little bit late, but are you trying to get all the MCOs to use a single source or single form for the non-emergency transport services?
Yeah, what we would like to do is a couple things. Number one, have a single form, but to be able to get information that is attainable by the EMS crew when they go to pick up a patient, because on the form right now for the pre-authorization, it's asking for information that is virtually impossible for an EMS provider to be able to get and submit prior to a claim being submitted. And part two of that would be to change the process a bit to where instead of it being a prior authorization form, that it would be a medical necessity statement that would go along with a claim, so that it all goes in together, so that we're not looking at two different submissions, two different actionable items, because the more forms that we're sending in at different times, the more chances we have of a claim not being able to get reimbursed because of something either going before the other form goes in, or missing documentation or something along those lines. So what the heart of the matter is, we want to eliminate barriers so that those claims that truly need to be reimbursed and truly are medically necessary can be done and the provider get reimbursed for it.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that for
Mhm.
me. I think that, So I would agree with what Stuart was saying. I know that like if there's a diagnosis code, and a statement from the physician regarding the medical necessity that the patient is unable to be treated another way, I think those are all very important. But if there is like an ICD-9 code, or I'm sorry, ICD-10 or a diagnosis code that any codes that can be put on this as well, if they have it. Is that something that the doctor's office, I mean, it seems like the doctor's office would have to fill that out, right?
It is something that if the transport is originating from the hospital where we're picking up the patient at, we should be able to get an ICD-10 code, or we can keep it as generic as possible so that, let's say a person is going home due to and I'm just going off the top of my head here, due to a complication to diabetes. We could put an ICD-10 code that may not be the exact ICD-10 code, but gets it into the ballpark so that you know that it is a kidney disease for why we're doing the transport. That may have been a bad example to use, but essentially we would use or try to keep the ICD-10 codes in a general area. If we can't get a specific, hopefully we would be able to get a specific, but as we have found out in some of the hospitals we go into, when they go into either Epic or Cerner or whatever program they're looking for, even sometimes the providers have a hard time finding what is the most accurate ICD-10 code, because there are so many different ICD-10 codes now.
Yes. Okay.
Is the, would you have the, I mean, is it likely that you can get it then? Or if not, because I know somebody was going to put it on the claim, would it be the same thing, same diagnosis, you know, or, I mean, is it pretty like common that you're going to get it at that time?
I would think it would be fairly close. I don't think that you would find a reason for transport to be radically different than what you would find on the claim as a reason for transport.
So I guess that's something I mean, because this is, if I recall correctly, 21 days would be the deadline from transport to submit the form and the claim. So obviously there would be time to synchronize and make sure that the
The 21 days, let me have either Linda or Dana explain that, because they know that part of it much better than I do. But I believe the 21 days is the time frame to where if additional information is requested or something along those lines. But let me open it to either Linda or Dana to be able to explain the 21 days a little bit better.
Okay, I think you can hear me now.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, this is Linda. And the 21 days I didn't get to thoroughly explain last time. When we carry a Medicare transport patient, a non-emergency, if the doctor does not sign off on the medical necessity at the time of transport, before or after, we are allowed 21 days to send for his signature to verify that this patient met medical necessity at the time of transport. However, at the end of 21 days, and we have it documented that we sent for it. In other words, we've got either certified mail that we sent for it, or a signed authorization book from the post office that shows we sent for it. If we are not able to obtain it in 21 days, then we are able to bill Medicare for payment without that PCS form. But we have to keep that documentation that we attempted to receive it on file. That's another point I wanted to make is with Medicare, if we are truly to follow Medicare, Medicare does not require us to submit the physician certification statement. They require us to have it or have the signed certification. We tried to get it. So what they can do though is they can come back and say, we want to see the documentation on this run. Then we are required to submit the trip report and the PCS form. So there's not a matter of having to send the physician certification statement every time to Medicare. So if we're going to follow those guidelines, that's also something to consider.
That's a good point. Thank you, Linda. So from that perspective, what's the thoughts of our MCOs that are on the line?
Yeah, this is Dr. Galloway from Humana. We
Yes, ma'am.
met internally and discussed, and I think we are fine with submitting the form and the information with the claim. But, since this is on our prior authorization list, we would require, documentation to support what's on the form with submission of the claim, because, we will review it as a post-service review on the back end.
Okay, so in other words, then for any of the, and if I'm mistaken, for all the Humana claims, we would have to have the physician certification statement to accompany the actual claim that the billing companies or the EMS service, if they don't use a billing company, would have to send in electronically or physically in order to get reimbursement. Am I stating that correctly?
Yeah, we would require, like I said, your trip report and your clinical information to back up what's on the form. I mean, so that we could actually do a review.
Okay,
Did you say a copy of the trip report as well?
Well, that would be part of the clinical information, yes.
Okay, please be advised that sometimes the hospital will document something on a PCS form that the crews do not personally observe at the time of the trip. So and that is what we have to bill off of. So they may not always coincide completely.
Well, it would be all part of the information. I mean, what occurs at the hospital that's documented on the form and as well as what your EMTs, paramedics document in their trip report. That's all would be considered clinical information.
Okay, thank you.
okay. So Humana would like to have the form and the claim form at the same time. Are there any of the other MCOs online that would like to follow that same stance, or are there others that are okay with getting the form by exception as opposed to getting them all the time, as the way Medicare currently does?
Yeah, and Keith, I'll have to discuss internally, because we've had meetings and we all talked about, providing the form. That would be
Sure.
the new process. I'll have to talk with them
Okay.
about that.
Okay,
Hi, Keith. Hi, Keith. This is Wendy McNamara from Aetna Better Health of Kentucky. And we're very similar to Humana's process. It sounds like we're quite aligned. It sounds like we would require a prior authorization form as well as the medical records and the medical necessity form from the providers. I want to kind of encourage the MCOs from getting away from using the word prior when we're saying prior authorizations. We just need Aetna Better Health of Kentucky requires an authorization to accompany your claim. So we all know that the state of Kentucky has a 12-month submission to submit your claim. So I feel like we are able to extend the time frame in which the EMS providers can submit their documentation. So we're willing to meet you halfway a little bit, but we still require that same information. So the medical necessity, the medical records, and your claims. But the sequence and how the EMS providers are submitting is vital, I feel like. And I also want to ask you a couple questions. I've been involved in the last few meetings. I'm sensing that maybe we need some provider education back to our back to our hospital providers to better assist you. I feel like there's some barriers there. I don't know if you would agree with that. Are you seeing on your end where the hospitals are just very reluctant to submit the proper paperwork timely? I have a 20+ year background in emergency room nursing medicine, and never once did I have a EMS crew show up that I didn't have that form prepared for them and the copy of the record. So it sounds like you guys are chasing it around, and I want to just touch on that. Do we need to provide education to our hospital providers?
I think to that point, and I'll open it up to the other EMS providers to comment how they would like. I think the problem isn't so much that they don't know it. The problem is they don't have the staffing to do it. That's the problem we're running
Sure.
into everywhere, both for EMS services to comply with this and the hospitals. I mean, sometimes we're doing good to catch up with the doctor or nurse to get a signature to begin with, let alone to get this other information
Hey,
that
Keith.
we're gonna have to provide. Yes.
Sorry, guys, I'm live from DC and it's loud here. So to answer her question, the hospitals, there's no requirement that says the hospitals have to give us pre-authorization information like it does Medicare. So I know several hospitals in my area just stopped doing it. Just the last 2 months, my hospital said they don't have time to do the pre-auth. They'll help us with the Medicare PCSs because they are actually required, but pre-auths aren't, and they are refusing to do that. So
Yeah,
just
and valid point there, Troy, but I think that's where we as the MCOs need to kind of come together and just remove the term prior from the term authorization, because we're just expecting you to get an authorization. It doesn't really have to happen. We certainly don't want you to avoid taking the trip. If the patient needs transported, they need transported. We don't want to delay that. So I feel as the MCOs, we need to get away from calling it a prior auth and call it just an authorization. And, take your trip, get the patient transported, provide the care. But then we need to maybe relax the time frame from where we will allow you to request an authorization at that point with the appropriate documentation, give you as the provider, EMS providers, that is the adequate time to get whatever necessary documents you need. And so that we can, submit your claim or process your claim timely at that point. Would
I
that,
agree,
would that
especially,
help you?
especially with the ERs. If you take a patient that's inpatient at the hospital and you got case managers, it's not really an issue there as much as it is ER, where you have only nurses that just not going to waste their time with it.
I understand.
That's where it's hardest. And, as far as getting medical equipment, I want to have to jump off here, but, a lot of our ambulance services aren't allowed to get background or healthcare, for all the different stuff, history of medical and things like that from the hospitals, because they're not part of that hospital. So we can't get all that documentation to back it up. But as far as, the run form and stuff like that, that's no trouble at all. But when it comes to health records and ICD-10 on what they're in the hospital for, that's our biggest problems.
So would it help to extend the time frame in which you can submit that documentation? And do you have the resources to chase that clinical and to chase that information?
No, not a lot of resources. And it doesn't, to me, amount of time doesn't matter, because the hospitals aren't going to give you medical history of a patient if you're not part of that institution. So
what if we made this form, have the essentially a post off, a window afterward, like what Wendy's talking about, however many days after the fact, not PA, but the auth request has to include this form.
The form that we're currently showing online, or the existing?
The PCS form, the physician.
Because the current, to your point, Stuart, that current form that we have, the current prior authorization form, it's basically nearly impossible to get. So if we can adopt this form and maybe change some rules around, that could be palatable. Joe, you had your hand up. What would you like to comment?
Well, this is Joe Pruitt. I got on a little bit late, but our problem is, if we don't get or capture the information at the time of the transport, I know in my local hospital, I'm not going to get it after that. The other problem is, and I like the idea, I think there needs to be a lot of education done with the hospitals, but then those folks that have been educated move on somewhere else, and nurses move on, new nurses come on board, and that information doesn't get passed down. So you're scheduling, in my case, a scheduling clerk that schedules these transports usually gets into an argument with the nurse that's calling it in because it's not their problem to get this information. It's our problem to get this information. And it's back and forth, back and forth. So if the PCS form can be adopted, all our staff pretty much across the state know to get that form on the non-emergency transports. And anything, whether you call it prior authorization or you call it authorization, whatever that has to transpire after that, it doesn't matter what the time frame is, it's not going to happen. Like Troy said, if we're not a part of that hospital group, then they're not too concerned about whether or not we get their information.
Yeah, I guess there's no consequences to the hospital.
Exactly.
And they just want the patient moved.
Yeah. Well, so maybe this form, this form as the post auth, is what would have to be submitted as a post auth request. I guess that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, so if we say that the PCS form will work, so this just could be a hypothetical here.
Mhm.
Hypothetically, we're saying that the PCS form is what we will start using and turning in with the claim. That will have to be turned in by our billing companies or through our EMS services that choose to do their own billing for all Medicaid claims for patients in Kentucky. Am I sounding right so far?
Yeah, well, I'm thinking it would be like the auth process. It really wouldn't have to be with the claim. You know what I mean?
Well,
And I don't
yeah.
know, but basically your auth request would be, and we'd have whatever deadline would be submitting this form is kind of what I'm thinking.
Sure, so long as we can establish that a service won't be penalized if the auth form comes in after the claim comes in,
Right.
because sometimes one form, actually a lot of times, one form can come in before the other, whether it's electronic or hard copy. That's all semantic at this point, but the fact is sometimes some information will come in before others. And that's been one of the things that have triggered a lot of the denials so far, have been because the prior auth didn't come in before the initial claim was received. And therefore the EMS service wasn't allowed to claim a reimbursement for that run. So I think that's one technicality we definitely need to clear up if we can all agree on it.
Yeah, because that would be a challenge. There would have to be an auth, like it's a different team. The claims processing team would look to see, was there an auth?
Mhm.
And if it hadn't been submitted yet, then they would say no auth. I'm sure it would be automatically deny no auth. So we would have to sync.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
so I'm sorry, this is Suzanne from United. Just wanted to jump in here real quick. I would have to take this away to my team because Stuart, what you were saying, there is an auth process that we have to follow, and there's information that needs to be gathered, obviously. And I don't, having just a single form may or may not have all of it. We may need medical records, just like, I think the person, and I apologize, I don't remember the name, the person from Aetna was saying, there is a process, there is information, there is documentation that's required to ensure that medical necessities being met on the front end. And I get that, like, we don't want to delay care. We do not want to delay any of that. And this is the kind of the gathering of information, but there's still that piece that has to be done before that claim can be paid. And so I think what you're asking, it sounds like what you're asking is to waive the auth process and submitting everything at one time on the back end for a claim. Is that what I'm hearing? Because that's what it sounds like to me. I just feel like there's something that's like you're trying to kind of put it all at the end, like at the back end.
Suzanne, you actually broke up there when you were speaking, and part of your one sentence didn't come through. I hate to ask you to repeat that, but could you re-summarize that again?
Yeah, sorry. No, it sounds like what you're asking is like for us to waive that auth process and then instead submit a form with a claim and not require an auth. That's kind of what I think I'm hearing, and I just wanted to ask for clarification.
Yeah, in a perfect world, we'd love to have it mirror the same Medicaid or Medicare program that we already comply with and meet the same rules as Medicare. Whereas that's what Linda had just brought up a little bit ago, that essentially it's only, approvals are only done as an exception, if you will, so that only if they see something with the electronic submission, do they say they want to see the actual PCS form or actual claim form. Otherwise, they let it go through as filed. And that ultimately, that would be what we would like to see, simply to be able to keep the amount of work and paperwork down on our EMS crews, because of the fact that getting this information from the hospitals in some cases is like pulling teeth. And as Troy has pointed out, and Joe mentioned, for a lot of these EMS services, if they're not part of the hospital system, they're not going to get access to the records that they need in order to get paid. And at the end of the day, that's as much of a dirty topic as money is. If we don't have the reimbursements, we're going to cease to exist.
Hey, can I talk one more time, just Keith, and I'll get off here?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that, the reason for the meeting is to find out, I think the only way we're going to get this ball rolling is to find out exactly what information the MCOs are needing to have on the form. And then let's look at that information and see what's capable. The biggest question, they got to require some certain stuff, and I completely agree with that, but medical records and ICD-10 from the hospital is not something we could readily get for every service. There are a few of us that are hospital-based ambulance services, and we can get that information. But for the most part, they can't get that information. So you have to go by what's on the run form that the EMT and paramedics fill out. That's what we do have access to. So I would like to just see us, what the meeting was for is to find out what information is needed for this form from each of the MCOs, so we can start a process and try to come up with a form.
So I'm thinking that maybe a proposal is they're still off, but that it would be submitting this form and it would be after the fact. That's kind of what I'm like, within a given deadline.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, that's what we do with Medicare. Once we make the form, we fill out, actually the doctors and nurses help us, they'll fill out the PCS form. We then submit that along with the run form, if that's what we need to Medicaid, to the MCOs. That's kind of in a gist the way Medicare does it. And they don't require medical records or anything from the hospital. So that's the whole reason behind all of this.
So I guess that's kind of the proposal for us, the MCOs, to kind of huddle, I guess, and see if we can do that.
Right. Yeah, and come up with the information, because by all means, the form that we submitted for as an example is definitely, we can add some little things and maybe even take away some things from that form. But we just need to know what is required of your MCO to get started on it.
Troy, this is Wendy McNamara from Aetna Better Health again. So the form that's being shown right now is sufficient. I personally, like others, probably would need to have the MPI of the provider that's sending the patient, obviously the member demographics, et cetera. And then the EMS providers, ICD-10 code, if would be required, as well as your codes for transport, the ground or air. And I think where I like the mobility piece of this.
Let me scroll down too. There may be more.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Whoops.
Yeah, all of this looks good. I think everything that's on this form is what we would require for claim submission for Aetna Better Health.
Could this be considered the auth request? Like literally, you got to submit an auth request, and it is this form, and the request is actually this form is what's provided.
Yeah, we would have enough information on this particular form to build a case, to build an authorization request. So that would eliminate the standardized PA request form that the state of Kentucky has. Correct, Keith?
Yes.
Okay.
And
For
you're
Aetna
gonna,
Better Health, this is sufficient.
Stu, this is Dan Brunner from Anthem. Is there at the top, is there a place for the at least the Medicaid ID number of the patient?
Yeah, it says Medicare ID, but we can change that.
Medicaid ID, okay. Because I like how Wendy said, we gotta take the prior out of the authorization. We don't require prior auth for emergent or non-emergent transports. As long as it's a participating provider in our network. But I get, well, you know, our ops team's on the call here as well, and they could comment, but on the back end, we would at least need, like you said at the beginning, when you're submitting the claim form, there's an ICD-10 code on there, correct? Keith?
That's a field. That's a field, I think, on every claim.
And
Yeah,
Keith, you
Linda or Dana, can you confirm that? Because y'all the ones who see these claims when they go in. I don't.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
when you file the claim, is there, Keith mentioned at the beginning that there is a diagnosis on the claim form or an ICD-10 code?
Yes, we put an ICD-10 code on the 1500.
Okay, I mean.
We are not allowed to put anything other than the patient's, this first box. We're not allowed to complete anything else on this physician certification statement.
Okay.
So
I think that would be sufficient to build the claim, because we, like you said, we got to take the, at least Anthem, we take the prior out of the authorization process.
And Wendy, I think you were saying you would like that ICD-10 code on this form. If so,
Yes.
yeah, I guess that would be, we could, customize it. It's going to be Kentucky Medicaid. Would that be an issue for you all? It would be an auth form and it would have that diagnosis. And again, it's retro, it's after the fact.
And
Yeah,
Keith, I'll just back that up real quick before you answer. The ICD form that you would put on, or ICD code that you would use on this form, it does not, for Aetna Better Health, it does not have to match what's on the final claim.
Okay.
As long as we're in the ballpark, like
Yeah,
the
that's-
example that you used, I think you're solid.
Yeah, and
For
then
us.
that was part of our concern as well, because especially when they changed the ICD 9 to 10, and things were made so micro that everybody was concerned that if they put something other than what somebody else put, are they going to get somebody going to come in and say that's fraud, and now you're going to be subjected to audits because somebody thinks what you're doing is fraudulent because you misquoted an alphanumeric code that was in part of the ICD-10 code, if you were even given that. So let me jump over. Dana, you got your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify, because you guys are speaking of this form and stating that some of you are stating that this form will be okay to utilize and that you think have it as everything on there that you need. But my question is to the MCOs, are you still going to require us to submit this first and then you come back with an authorization number before we can submit our claim? Or are you going to allow us to submit this form along with the claim and then it be utilized as an authorization? And at that point, deny for that it doesn't meet medical necessity based off the information on here with the claim? Or are you looking for it to be submitted prior to us submitting the claim?
Yeah, and I think that's what we need to huddle, respectively, with each MCO. Our MCOs internally. I guess for you all, would you prefer it just be part of the auth? Like this is an auth request and it does not have to be filed with the claim.
This is Dr. Galloway from Humana. We already discussed this internally and we can make it a cleaner process if the form is submitted along with the run sheets with the claim, and then we can just get the claim, do a post-service review and, then process it at that point, either as the information meets medical necessity or not. I mean, it's cleaner for us to do it that way.
This is Jeremy Randall from Anthem, and I would agree with that statement as well. Like the form can be submitted with the claim, and we can do the clinical review at that point.
Would it be submitted to the auth team or filed with the claim as an attachment? I guess that's what I'm wondering.
It would be
For me-
filed with the claim attached.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anthem agrees with that. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
part of the
that's how
claim-
it would be with Humana also.
Okay, a claim submittal process.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
it
so
would
do
be
you-
sent to us on the back end over to UM to look at it before the claim was processed.
So just to clarify, the physician certification statement would be submitted with a claim. It's not necessarily being considered an authorization or a prior authorization. It will be reviewed at the time the claim is processed and determined at that point whether the information meets medical necessity or not.
I believe that's the way this is going, Dana.
Yeah, hey Keith, it's Suzanne. I just want to make sure that, so it sounds like we're saying that the auth process is no more, and that what we want on the back end is to submit the form with the claim, and it's all done at one time. That's what I thought, right?
That's correct, if I'm hearing this correctly.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's what I just heard, and because it is different, that's what I was trying to figure out. Is it still gonna be auth or is it gonna be claim? Because it's two different processes,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah, so I think that does require me to take it back to my claims team and look at this and look at how we can do this on the back end. And my apologies, I don't have a copy of this form. So if so, I put a note in the chat with my email address. If somebody could drop that in an email to me, I would greatly appreciate it. And I can take this back to our claims team and our medical director and take a look at this and see what we can do, and then get back to you all with an answer.
Yeah,
How
I think
soon do
I
you
think
need
this
that?
particular form, if this is gonna be the form we're gonna use, then it needs to go out to everybody. Personally, I've not seen this particular draft of it. So I think it needs to go out to all the TAC members. It needs to go out to all the MCOs. It needs to go to everybody so that we're all on the same page. We all know what the form is, and the additional data points that you ask for, we can note what those need to be added onto the form.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you all have one, have the one that you have or whatever, that, you know, and could send that out. I mean, that's fine as well. This was the one that I had. I forget where I thought it came from, somebody on the TAC, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, it
I mean, I can
refers
send this
to,
out. I can send this out, but I was gonna say, if you all have a version that you're comfortable with, would rather send out, you know, just, that's obviously fine.
yeah, Linda, go
not-
ahead.
I
I'm
was gonna
sorry,
say,
I
I
was gonna
think the
say,
one
I'll
re-
look through my records, and Stuart, I believe I sent it to you and Linda
Okay.
sent it to me, so I'll look through that
Okay.
and try to get that out.
Yeah,
And
go
I've
ahead.
heard so far, it's just ICD-10 code and the Medicaid ID are the only changes, I think I've heard.
Keith?
Yeah.
This particular form here that I'm seeing looks to be a 2-page report, certification, and it is going to require a recoding for a lot of the hospitals that already have the standard PCS form in it. But we know it's going to have some revisions to be able to accommodate everyone's needs.
If
Yeah.
y'all have an easier form, that's fine.
Well,
Yeah.
there's another form that is out there. It's a PCS form that came from a law firm that it's all on one page. So if we
Oh,
can
okay.
make it on one page, but yet give you the information you need, to me, shorter is better, as long as we're providing the information. But when we start adding 2 pages, I'm just in my mind envisioning crews making photocopies of pages and then forgetting to put page 2 on there, and then we're having to go back, and it's going to become a cluster if we're not careful.
Yeah,
So-
I totally agree. If y'all could send the form you have to everybody, that'd be great. That 1 page sounds wonderful.
Yeah, we'll be happy to send that out, and so that we're not missing anything. We know that we need to change the terminology from Medicare to Medicaid on it, and we need to add the ICD-10 code. was there any other information that, as of now, granted, you'll have to take it back to your teams to discuss, but as of we sit here right now, is there any other data points that you can think of that is required that we need to have on this form? Because what we can do is we can do some template work here to incorporate all this so that we can send you what the current PCS looks like right now that we have, and then have somebody that's really good at doing forms. I'm not that person, to come up with a generic to send out to make sure everybody's good with it. But if there's more information we need to put, let's get that identified. Yes, Linda, go ahead.
So I want to clarify that they do want the facility, because signing this, completing this form, to put an ICD-10 code on here. They are not going to accept the words of of a diagnosis or a complaint. Is that correct? And second point, I want to confirm, I want to make sure that, look in section 3 down here where it's got start date, end date. That section 3 is intended to be for dialysis patients, wound care patients, patients who have long-term routine transportation. If you will notice, that has up to 60 days that portion is normally good for. We haven't spoken about that. But when you're taking a patient to dialysis 3 times a week and picking them up 3 times a week, it's a great burden to have to get a PCS form every time. Medicare does not require that. They require us to get one form with a start and end date and to get it updated every 60 days. So that's 2 points.
That's a great point. Maybe we could have a section that says dialysis. Well, I guess it's therapy, radiation, chemotherapy as well.
Yes.
Anything that's a series of transportation. Does the Medicare one have this section, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, and the Medicare one, the one thing that Linda was talking about, where it's got words instead of ICD-10 code, it spells out contractures, or it spells out unable to ambulate. So instead of it having an ICD-10 code on there, it's specifically stating what the reason is why the patient has to go by an ambulance, instead of using the ICD-10 code. So is it mandatory that it has to be in code form, or will plain language be suitable for the reason for transport?
And Wendy, I think you were one talking about the ICD-10 code. Is that kind of a, what are your thoughts on that?
Now,
As
note
far-
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead, Linda.
I was
Go
going
ahead,
to say,
Linda.
note you will have the ICD-10 codes on your 1500
On the claim?
on the claim.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we can get the ICD-10 code on here ballpark, like I mentioned, I think we would be fine. We should only be accepting what's on the final claim submission though. And that should, in our opinion, when we're processing claims, that's what we require. As far as the dialysis, the number of trips, Stuart, is that what you were asking me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's the scenario we have to deal with.
This is my thoughts on that. I think that if we are going down the route of needing to set up long-term, what I would consider long-term ambulance transportation for that scenario alone, then we would want to get that established prior to the services being initiated with approval for X number of units. So you would kind of want to look at those from like a true prior auth type of standpoint. Would you agree with that? Because the services haven't happened yet and you're arranging it for multiple trips. And if you have one authorization on file for let's say 10 trips, then it would be up to the EMS provider to initiate a new authorization when they have exceeded or met that limit.
Yeah, this is Dr. Galloway with Humana. I would concur because we do not have a way in our claim system to set it up so that the multiple claims would pay. I mean, if they don't, if we set up the process that the form's got to be there with the run sheet and that stuff, then that's what it's going to have to be for everyone. I mean, that we can't set up multiple processes on the claim side. So I agree with Wendy. This would be a true prior authorization, just like any other, and you would need to just do it on the front end and get it approved. So that way, when those claims come in, it would look for the prior authorization and would pay.
So would we
That
Without
may-
having to submit
separate-
the information multiple times.
Mhm.
Would we separate that, make that as not part of this, but a separate thing, you know, PA for series, but and take it out of this process, so to speak?
I would think
I would.
so, and I will have to check with our claims how we can set that up for it to know to look. I mean, that and again may get a little tricky, but you know, I would I can't speak for our claims, but I would think we could come up with something to set that process up.
Yes, Linda.
And Medicare and our providers are used to they call it repetitive trips on these patients. They are used to having to have that done ahead of time. They might be able to make the first week of trips while they're getting that. But after the first, say, 10 trips, then they have to have the repetitive or the prior authorization set up. And Medicare gives them an authorization number, the same as you would in this type of case.
Okay.
So that would be separate, I think. It sounds like that scenario from this.
Yes,
we-
I would agree.
We'd have to come up with a separate form then for the repetitive.
Right.
Would it, because sometimes it's going to take time between the time that the dialysis is ordered from the time it gets approved. Are you all good with, let's say, setting an arbitrary number, like 9 or 10 transports that can occur with reimbursement while the process is being done to review, subject to review, so that we don't potentially put a patient or delay a patient from getting dialysis while we wait on a prior authorization for us to be able to do that, such as how Medicare does it.
Yeah, I know I would have
Say
to.
that
huddle
good, or did
internally.
I confuse that even worse?
No, I completely understand. I have to huddle internally with staff. I completely understand what you're saying, though. It's basically kind of off after a threshold, after so many visits, then the auth kicks in for more.
Yeah, but essentially because it is dialysis, we don't want to sit back and tell the patient, you're going to have to wait a week or two to get authorization. If a doctor has ordered it to begin immediately, we don't want to wait for a prior authorization. We'll go ahead and take care of the patient right then and there, and then know that it's being worked in the background, but know that those claims are not going to necessarily be thrown out simply because it was done before we had an authorization received.
So in my opinion, on that scenario, Keith, what I would do is just submit an individual trip until you have a prior authorization established for a set number of units. I would follow that same process.
Okay. Dana and Linda, are y'all good with that?
Yes,
Yes, as long
Okay.
as that's working for you guys, yes.
Does Medicare define repetitive, or is it, I guess it's just anything that's multiple trips?
yes, they do define it.
Keith, this is Suzanne. I'm gonna ask another question again. I just want to make sure I'm understanding. It sounds like there's two things here. We want to waive claims. We want to waive PA for that single use non-emergent transport and allow the PCS form to be submitted with a claim, not requiring prior auth. That's the first thing. The second thing is for repetitive trips. The example given was dialysis, that we would have a similar. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
that you have a similar form that would be filled out, but it would require additional review and it would go through a regular PA process, prior auth process. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Okay, that's the proposal. All right, I just want to make sure I'm clear on that. I have to take this back to my team for clarification. And like I said, my CMO is going to have to review it and make sure she's okay.
Sure.
But yeah, okay, good. Thank you.
Dr. James, do you have a question?
Let me come off mute. No, I was getting another phone call, but the only comment I was going to make is asking a medical director about claims issues is fraught with danger. I'm taking notes on everything that you said and want to get back to the right people.
Yeah, one of the things that will occur with this is we'll get at the end of it in a few days, we will get a transcript of the entire meeting done by court reporter, and they are exceedingly accurate. So
I hope this form will also get approval from DMS. It really helps if we have DMS, not only for its own traditional Medicaid people, but also saying that it's got the blessing. Things move faster that way.
Linda?
Currently, Passport does not require prior authorizations. Are you going to follow the same trend as everyone else here? Or are you going to maintain your current process, Dr. James?
I don't see a reason why we would change things, but if there's a form that should be married up with claims to make it easier and consistent for everybody, whatever works.
Okay. So the form that we finalize, come up with, get everybody's buy-in on, we would need to go ahead and submit to Aaron or Kelly or Aaron. Would you all be able to take it and start it through the process within Medicaid services, or is there another process we need to follow for that?
I'm going to ask Angie Parker if she can answer that, because I know there is a process that the MCOs submit documents to DMS for approval. And that's just a tad bit out of my wheelhouse. So Angie, do you mind to answer that?
Each MCO is to submit any forms that are utilized for providers to DMS for approval. I've been sitting here listening to a lot of the conversation, and I feel that I don't think I was on the last meeting, or if I was, not the whole meeting, regarding this challenge that the EMS is having with each of the MCOs on their different forms or different requirements. It is certainly our expectation that, and it sounds like it's going to happen, that the MCOs are working together to have a similar position on how this is obtained. But whatever the final form is going to be, it would be the MCOs would have to submit that for DMS approval, unless DMS were to develop the form and say, MCOs, this is the form you need to use for EMS authorizations.
And you know, Angie, when you tell us to jump, we say how high.
I mean,
Yeah.
we can always step in on this process to help it, but it sounds like right now, it's been a collaborative discussion on how best to rectify the challenges that EMS is having.
Yeah, I think quite honestly, the way this has gone so far, with everybody being willing to work with one another and to come out with a solution, I'd much rather to continue going down this road, a collaborative effort, as opposed to turning it over to the state and saying, hey, we got a problem, you fix it. No, everybody gets a black eye when we do that. So if we can work on this together and come to a solution, then I think that's going to be more palatable.
Now, I
But-
can't answer per se to the fee-for-service side of things for the ambulance, and I don't know if you've been having challenges with the fee-for-service authorizations or not, or even if it requires it. So that side I'm not familiar with.
You know, fee for service, we could probably hold you up for another conversation that would be much longer than what we've got time for today to discuss,
Okay.
without a doubt. Okay, so,
Keith,
yes.
do you have the form, sorry, the form or somebody that has the form that the one pager that can send to everybody? I just want to make sure that goes
Yeah, I
out.
think, Kelly, did you, or I'm sorry, Aaron, did you just send out an email that it has been sent to the group?
Yes, I
Oh,
attached
okay.
an email where I had originally sent it out in, I believe, April. So I resent all that out to everyone and grabbed the emails that were dropped in the chat.
Wonderful. Thank you, Aaron.
Okay, so it sounds like we've got a good basis for what information needs to be on the form, what forms need to be used for what. I sure wouldn't want to be the court reporter, having to be the one to take all the notes for today's meeting, that's for sure. One of the questions that also has come up, moving down to item number 3 on the agenda here, was the qualifications for persons reviewing the medical appropriateness. The question was brought up because with Medicare, there's a rule that the people that are reviewing the claims need to have a medical background equal to a and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially they've got to have medical background so that it just doesn't become a string of denials just simply because, and it's somebody that is medically educated that knows what is being indicated on the form. So that was a question that came up, is who actually reviews the forms and do they have a medical background?
Well, for Humana, it would go through our normal nurse review, and if she didn't feel like she could approve, it would go to our medical director to look at.
Okay,
Only a doctor can deny medical necessity.
okay,
That's correct. That's the same process for Aetna Better Health. Nurse reviewer and sent to the medical director for medical necessity reviews
Yeah, and
prior to
that's
claim
in
submission.
statute and our contract with EMS.
okay. Again, that was a question that came up, so I wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity to discuss real quick. I don't think item number 4, vote to accept the basis of the form. I think based off and if y'all think differently, please tell me, but I don't think we need to vote at this point because we don't have a form to actually vote on. But I think based off the conversation we've had and based on the comments from all of our MCOs that are on the call, which is Aetna, WellCare, Humana, United Health, Anthem, Passport, that we are in principle agree to what needs to be on the form, what the forms will need to be used for. And we will now be able to take this back and develop another form that we can send to the group. And what I would like to do is send this new form out prior to the next meeting so that hopefully at the next meeting, we can discuss and vote on the form to make sure everybody's good with it and hopefully adopt it as soon as possible so that we can start to get the reimbursement claim process going in the right direction for EMS again. Does anybody have any comments about that process or taking that approach? Yes, Linda.
And I also get a copy of the PCS form that was up here initially, the first page one, so that I can look at anything there that is not on the one page that we might need to add in.
Yeah, the one that I shared.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. I'll send that to Aaron to send out to everybody.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, and I just want to, Keith, is it okay to clarify? You said that we're taking this back. Each MCO is taking it back. I know some folks have said it's not a problem, but I still need to clarify that with my team. So.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and let's do this. If there is something that gets brought up, if let's say your claims team comes back and says, you know, there needs to be a little bit of a cleanup. I know we're not supposed to do official meeting stuff without being in a meeting, but if it is a technicality as far as, you know, something misspelled, something out of place, I think that's something we can make a change on without having to meet and make the agreement to do it. But if it is something that we have to pull everybody back together, then we'll have to wait till August to do it. But if it is a simple change, email it to the EMS TAC for us to be able to take a look at it. And perhaps we can just incorporate it into the form, send it out to everybody and let it be reviewed again so that we're not making this process potentially go longer than what we have to, if everybody's okay with that.
That works for me. I think that works for me, is to do it through email if we have questions.
Yeah, I agree.
Same.
If
Very
you
good.
can just make sure to filter all of that through me, I would
Mhm.
appreciate that. This is Erin.
And Keith, this is
Absolutely.
Aetna Better Health. I would make a suggestion. I don't know what the other MCOs, how they feel about this, but I feel like once the form is decided upon and agreed upon, that you as the EMS take it to DMS for the DMS to enforce.
Mhm.
Would make life a little bit easier for everybody and improve consistency.
Sure, absolutely. I also sit on the Kentucky Board of EMS, so once we get this form to everybody's liking and gets approval, I'll take this to our next scheduled board meeting. Make sure everybody's aware of it, and we can get it blasted out and get widest dissemination we can. In fact, from a timing perspective, if we approve this, or if the TAC approves this in August, our next meeting is at the EMS convention conference that is down in Lexington, which we get some of our best attendance for board meetings at that conference. So it will probably be the best place to disseminate the word about this. So from a timing perspective, it seems to be lining up fairly well.
Keith, I will send an email to the MCOs to request. Your next meeting is on the 28th, so I'll request that they have that to me. I believe the 21st is the Monday prior. Wendy, if you don't mind to drop your email, Wendy with Aetna, I don't believe I have your email contact, so I can just email the people in this group just to request that by the 21st to get it out for review prior to the next August meeting.
Sure thing.
Thank you.
Outstanding. That was a fantastic segue into item number 6, which is the meeting date, which is August 28th from 2 to 4. And I've got 2 6s there. Apologize for that. Auto numbering did not catch that for me. I apologize. With this being a special meeting, I would typically ask if there was any comments or anything from everyone, but because it is a special meeting, we're not supposed to do that. So I will ask though, are there any last comments about the form or the process that we've discussed today that you're just now thinking of, or something we need to consider, or is everybody good? Going once.
I can't think of anything.
Awesome. Very good. Like it when something comes together. Sounds great. Folks, I cannot thank you enough for being willing to work with us on this. Anything we can do to help our EMS providers get the reimbursement they need to survive is a good thing. And the opportunity to be able to work together as a group and accomplish that, I think speaks volume to the group and being able to work together. So again, thank you all very much. With that, we'll have a vote for adjournment.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Pruitt to adjourn. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Linda and Dana both seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Pat, opposed? Awesome, very good. Thank you all very much and look forward to speaking with you again very soon.
Thank you all. We all appreciate you having this emergency meeting. We appreciate it. It's very helpful.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Keith.
Thank you.
thank
Have a
you
great
all.
day.
Bye-bye.